All right, let me share my screen. Can you see the presentation right now?
Yes, I can see that. Thank you.
Okay. So we wanted to talk today about the ethics of deepfakes, and I'm gonna get us started. Um, so deepfakes are essentially a form of Photoshop that is able to create extremely realistic effects with the help of artificial intelligence. And I'm sure most of us learned about deepfakes from some kind of exploitative act because recently deepfakes have exploded in the media for how they're being used extensively to portray others and to promote misinformation in a way that's quite deceitful and non-consensual. So clearly right now deepfakes are being exploited for non-ethical purposes. But if we look deeper into deepfakes, we see their value. So an example of something deepfakes can do is to capture the facial expressions of a person and seamlessly map it onto the face of another person. And clearly, this is something that only a decade ago would have taken a Hollywood grade, like CGI artist, hours of work. So it's definitely a huge stride in technology, and we should be tapping into it in a way that actually benefits society. Um, so if it's okay, I'd like to show a video that kind of demonstrates the potential of, or like what deepfakes are right now.
Of
Uh,
course, go ahead.
okay.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has a lot on her plate. Leading the House of Representatives, quelling factions in her own party, going head to head with President Trump. She's a favorite target of Republicans, and also the alt-right. Recent videos circulating online have been manipulated to make the Congresswoman's words sound sluggish and slurred. This video, posted by the Politics Watchdog Facebook page, has more than 28,000 shares and 1.2 million views. It shows Pelosi speaking at the Center for American Progress Ideas Conference on May 22nd. But when compared to the Washington Post's verified feed of the same event, it is clear the Facebook video is playing at 75% of the original speed.
We want to give this president the opportunity to do something historic for our country. We want to give this president the opportunity to do something historic for our country.
Adjusting the speed like this would make Pelosi's voice sound low and distorted.
We want to give this president the opportunity to do something historic for our country.
But her pitch has also been altered to sound more like her natural speech.
We want to give this president the opportunity to do something historic for our country.
It's unclear who doctored the original, but versions of the same video were shared by other users on different platforms, some with captions alleging Pelosi was drunk. This is not the first time video of the speaker has been manipulated to portray her in a negative. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has.
Right. So as we saw in the video, Pelosi's appearance and voice were altered to make her appear intoxicated. And this is a big issue because it was widely circulated on social media around the 2020 elections. And this made the Democrats lose credibility, even though the clip wasn't real. So it showed that the threat of deepfakes and other forms of realistic Photoshop are definitely a real threat. So this brings us to our problem statement. And what we want you to take away from our presentation is that deepfakes have a lot of potential to benefit society. It's definitely a huge gateway into technological advancement. And for instance, companies right now are trying to use deepfakes to create assistive technology for the visually impaired to try and narrate the world around them and to try and like capture their environment. So that's an example of deepfakes being used to improve accessibility and benefiting society in that respect. Another example is in the education sector, where companies are trying to use deepfakes to create interactive simulations and visualize like concepts to teach in the classroom. And this definitely improves like engagement and even promotes understanding in classrooms. Another really amazing application I read about is that deepfakes are being used for bereavement purposes to try and emulate loved ones who passed away in hopes that this will help family members deal with their grief. Um, so, so clearly there's a lot of untapped potential in deepfakes that we can use to really help society, but we need some kind of rules and regulations to realize its true potential and to stop people from exploiting deepfakes the way that it's widely being used right now. So for our approach, we're hoping to help people realize the potential of deepfakes and to prevent their unethical use by enforcing regulations that ensure that they're being used responsibly and ethically. So we thought that some main things we need to focus on are that we need to ensure that people depicted in the deepfakes are informed and give consent of how they're being portrayed. And they also need to know to what extent they're being circulated on online platforms or wherever they're being shared as deepfakes. We also need a system to actively identify and prevent the spread of any information that could have large social effects. So that would be, for instance, like a political deepfake. And we also need to implement community policing where we can discourage the spread of deepfakes on a smaller scale first. So through policies such as downranking and limited sharing within platforms and social media groups, we would effectively allow moderation on a smaller scale. So you're preventing the spread of a potentially harmful deepfake by squashing it when it's still being spread within a community. With this, I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
So we're actually going to be talking about the development process. Okay, so we use deontology in order to kind of explain how deepfakes are unethical, because what deepfakes do is basically they lie and they deceive people, and these are universally known to be unethical things to do. So it seemed like the obvious comparison in terms of which ethical principle we were supposed to choose. In terms of what we did, we clearly explained the ethical principles to justify the malicious intent, and then we located current companies that actually don't, they kind of abide by the principles of deontology. They don't really have, their uses of deepfakes are not unethical, and we will see why in the next slide. Nancy, so one of our examples for the evidence used is Topaz Labs, where they were able to develop tools for users to realistically edit images. The reason why this is ethical. I mean, it's still image editing and video editing in terms, it still alters voices. Lots of these companies still do that. But the reason why we would consider this to be something ethical is because it gives the user full control. It's full transparency, and they're able to kind of control what they edit. And that's not to say that their uses are going to be unethical, but right now we're talking about the actual companies that develop these softwares. They are very transparent with their audience, and they specifically would let them know what the package is and what they're able to do. They're able to alter voices. And a lot of this is used for advertising and animation. So it's not really harmful or deceitful. There's no particular outcome other than entertainment or sometimes advertising. Looking into the next company, Modulate, it does enable users to alter voices, and this is very popular in the gaming community. People playing video games, they can play against each other, and this would help a lot because it would cut costs for a lot of people playing against each other. Like someone wouldn't have to hire multiple players and pay them hourly, and he would be able to do that all on his own, and he would have full control. And there's another company, we have Respeecher and we have Rephrase AI. One of them alters voices, which is kind of the same as modulate, but it's geared towards more of animation as opposed to gaming. And then rephrase will generate realistic visuals of faces, and it can be used to advertise. So we can kind of see a common theme here that a lot of these things are used to advertise and to animate, and so they're not based on real people, where consequences are a lot bigger. They're like, for example, I know Mahika was showing the Nancy Pelosi example, and that is a huge consequence to deepfakes because it does lie to a lot of people, but a lot of these uses from these companies don't aim to lie, but may just basically give users an opportunity to kind of play around with video editing, image editing, and yeah, we're gonna go ahead to the next slide. Notes from the instructor. So initially, we had not planned to really look into the ethical uses of deepfakes. I don't even think it really crossed our minds in the beginning until you actually mentioned that. So thank you. We looked into a lot of the, well, basically it was a little harder to kind of look into the ethical uses of deepfakes because deepfakes have a really horrible stigma and reputation, and it's kind of hard to really deconstruct that and find multiple companies that kind of abide by what we want to prove deepfakes to be in the future. And so we found a couple companies, and I guess the note specifically was to find the opposite of what we were initially planning to do, which is to find ethical uses for deepfakes. And we did do that by finding the companies and defining how they follow deontology. So yeah, that should be it for my part. We can introduce the next.
All right, just to wrap it up, the overall thing is like that deepfake is just a new technology that's able to manipulate a person's voice and manner just by a sample of them. And we can see them as initially to have just a harmful con to it, like it happens to damage someone's reputation. It could undermine different companies if it's used in a bad way, and just defraud the public in general because you know, it can manipulate whatever people thought and just have impression of people and certain topics. But there are some things to gain from it, as mentioned before, which is giving voices to people with disabilities, giving people to have a better form of expression for themselves because with like in terms of games or just their images. It helps kids learn education and generally just have a bigger technology advance in AI because this is something that you never thought 5, 10 years ago could ever happen. And it started cascading from like Photoshop and such. And now without like massive like production or extensive knowledge, you can able to produce like a very, very realistic video from just like from the tip of your hand. And although like we see like the rest of this, we can't, it's not really inevitable because it's come with new technology, there are new consequences and new regulations from it. So we just have to really set the standard and kind of raise awareness of the pros and cons of this will bring on along with us. Next slide. So moving forward, what can we see? Like, so things we can see is maybe like from now, like for example, like TikTok, like a lot of these people have a lot of flags, like you can flag a video, and it's up to like the certain website to kind of have a way for it to be reported and to be verified. So maybe from like more influential people, we could see like a more verified source coming from them and have a way of verification if you're not posting of like a more significant figure and like a more not like from a direct account from them. And it's just also to educate people because like for example, like a lot of things we've seen in the past is like Photoshop and people would think, oh, this is real fake, but they didn't know. But now it's like you're able to see differentiate between like a real and fake photo. Whereas for this, it's like on the video too. And it's just to educate everyone and hopefully in the future, like this wouldn't be so much of a problem, but as now it's really coming to light that it potentially could be. But as long as we are able to be more aware of the situation, it shouldn't be that bad in the coming years. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Professor.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
talking.
muted. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I have a couple questions for your presentation. The first one is something which we never talk about, and I just came up with this when I read your paper and also sit through your presentation. It's about positive or at least possibly positive application of deepfake, which there was one particular case which I actually want to see your opinion, each one of you, what you think about this application. So deepfake allow us to transpose our, say, facial expression or sometimes our voice to a different avatar or different kind of person that's actually talking as if we are talking. And if I use this technology in the, I would say, interview process, for example, just an example, interview for a job. And we know there is always a concern about because how we look or because how we sound. And when we interview, we might get some kind of implicit bias because of the people who interview us has certain implicit preference about what kind of person he like to hire. So do you think that is actually a good thing or is a bad thing? Is that when a company interview the person, at least the first few rounds, that we should use deepfake? And this is basically consent to both sides, both the employer and the employee, such that the person who interview the candidate or screening the candidate has no other information besides the content or the facial expression in an abstractive way, but you have no way to know what's the color of the skin or even some other information that can derive from seeing the real image. What do you think about this application? Do you think it's better or worse?
I think that's definitely an application to think about because at least that way, if you don't get the job, you won't wonder if like it had something to do with your appearance or your race or something like that. So maybe it would give like a fair chance to everyone applying to the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's actually really a good application.
By the way, it's not just the race and the color of the skin, but also the gender. I'm
Yeah,
actually thinking
yeah.
that you don't even know whether that is a female or male, right?
Yeah, because you could modify your voice too.
Right. It's
Yeah.
we can do that. I mean, just something bad happen, like the Google's echo chamber,
Yeah.
the report. That's
Mhm.
how about Zhang and Brian? What do you think about this idea?
I agree. I think you really can't eliminate bias in the interview process, no matter how much. We can never really eliminate bias from anyone. And so just having the option where it's just assessing a person's skills without any special considerations of just about anything related to that person, I think we can definitely result in a positive outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I truly do think we can't eliminate biases with anyone. It's just natural. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's just natural. And so I think that's a good application.
For me, I want to add like, in addition to like removing that kind of bias and it's just like have a more like, I guess, and it's sort of like a fair decision. I feel like it's also helps people in terms of like expressiveness because I feel like if you're set into this more anonymous kind of setting, I feel like you're able to be truly more expressive about yourself in terms of like an interview process. Something like it removes that peer pressure too. Like something I thought about when you mentioned about like that remove that kind of like that barrier, that boundary between like that face to face rather than using like a deepfake to submit your application process rather than just like a face to face real life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I'm thinking about this is potentially at least controversial. And for the interview process, I still believe that the last round of the interview for the hiring manager still may want to see the real person, in my opinion, because there's something you want to see if that person will fit the culture of the team and things like that.
Yeah.
But the early round of the interview process, I think we should try to be as objective as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're gonna be seeing them in real life. You're having this like real-time conversations, and you're basically gonna be working as a person. So once you get that last round, I definitely do agree that it's like you need to finally are you finally able to like show your true self and finally to make that final decision for the employer to see like if it's actually a real good fit for the team.
Right. Right. And also I think this is something which will be okay, because if the hiring manager decide that using deepfake at the early stage cannot really find the right person he wants, then they can actually decide to do something different. But yeah, okay, all right. Thank you for your answer. This is no right or wrong, no the clear answer, but this is something which I think is interesting for the deepfake to be used in this kind of we're using deepfake to deal with things like a discrimination or deal with this kind of bias, implicit bias. Yeah. So the second question I want to ask you is that I think it was maybe Mihika or Zhang, when you actually talk about one of the slides, you talk about a community-based policing about the information that could potentially be deepfake. Is that right? One of you actually talk about that. So how would you, I mean, all of you can provide answer to this. How would you propose to do this kind of community-based policing? The thing is that my trouble with this is that deepfake, it could be from anywhere. And for a normal person, it's so hard for me to know that this has been deepfaked unless I actually saw the original video. And if this video come in from a totally different source, it might be very late for me to actually realize that this is actually a deepfake. What do you think about regarding community policing?
So I think, first of all, I think that we have to have some guards that show us that it's actually a deep fake and not an original like video. And I don't think we're at the stage yet where we can like where it's hard for us to differentiate between a deep fake and a real video, because right now, if we look at any deep fakes, it's evident that they're not real just because of how robotic they look. But I guess like once we can't differentiate between them anymore, we'll have to come up with some way to detect that and flag that. But assuming we have technology that does that for us, I was thinking that within communities, we'd have like something that we can use to flag a potentially harmful video. So if anyone notices a video that they think could be harmful, they could flag it. And I guess once it reaches a threshold of users that have flagged it, it gets removed or supervised by another moderator with more power, and they remove it before it can be spread too quickly to larger platforms or something like that. So that's the kind of thing I was thinking of.
So when you say you flag it, meaning that you think the content is harmful, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was deepfake, right?
No, I said like assuming that you could tell that it was a deepfake, then we flag it to say that this is a potentially harmful deepfake. It promotes some kind of misinformation.
I see.
Or something like that. Yeah.
I see. Okay, here's my concern, because any technology can detect deepfake is also helping the deepfake to be better. Because if you have a technology to differentiate, then I can actually try to send in different version of deepfake and see which one will be labeled, will be tagged as deepfake, and such that I will essentially is going to be both sides, the defender and the deepfake deepfaker is going to competing with each other, and so I my feeling is that given the technology improve, I think eventually it's really hard for you to be able to differentiate based on the only thing you actually know that it's a deepfake is that you actually already know what's the original, what's the source. You can actually say probabilistically this one has a one component from the other video, and then you can actually probabilistically know that. But if I show you one image or one video, it's going to be really hard. I mean, not even for the best tool, not even mentioned about community user to be able to. But I know when you say community policing, you're assuming that we already have that detection technology. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess ideally, I guess if we are using all deepfakes ethically, then it shouldn't be a problem if we report that this every deepfake is a deepfake itself, right? So if we're like, this is a deepfake at the end of every deepfake or something, then there's no doubt that it is a deepfake, right?
Yeah. I somehow feel like a pessimistic about the subject we're talking about, because it's just there are so many ways that the content can be injected into our cyber world, and there is so much engineering related to deepfake you can do before you inject that, before that injection, and we have no control. And for some of the video just come in the first time, it's hard to. I mean, the movie company is actually certainly doing that already for the entertainment. So it really, by the way, the issue with deepfake is that it really destroy a lot about our trust about the information we receive. I guess I should share with you my view about the whole thing about deepfake. It has to be change our paradigm. So our paradigm today is accept by default. Accept by default means that we got something into our system. We by default it's true. By default we trust that, and unless you actually tell no, this is Nancy Pelosi's 75% slowdown, and by default we actually believe that, and that's what's going on right now. But I think with deepfake that we have to move from there to deny by default, meaning that we cannot trust anything except those being authenticated by Nancy Pelosi, for example, that she actually has a public key certificate, and or Fox News or MSNBC, they actually authenticate somehow about the original of the information. Otherwise, we don't trust that essentially, because just so bad. Yeah.
I think that was one of the things we mentioned in our regulations, that like anyone depicted in the deepfake should know that they're being depicted, and I guess give their consent to whatever they're saying in the deepfake or however they're being portrayed. So I guess that's another way to verify the truth, but it is difficult to to inform everyone too.
By the way, you mentioned something very interesting. If somebody got depicted in a deep fake, the company who should really do this kind of checking is Facebook and Google.
Mhm.
So Google has the collection of a huge amount of images. And they actually, assuming they can actually get a picture of authentic picture of all the politicians in the United States. Let's actually focus on politician.
Mhm.
If they have an authentic picture for all the politicians in United States, then any picture that's actually match facial expression to one of the politicians should be flagged immediately. And in that case, they need to contact the team that operate by the politician, and they actually need to look at the video or manually or computationally to decide whether that
Yeah.
one is actually really is the politician that's being portrayed.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I asked all the question I want to ask, and this is interesting topic, and deepfake is not new, but I like your approach to this problem and look at both the concern and the positive application. I think that trigger some good idea from this process. So I'm happy with what you have done. Thank you very much for all three of you. I think that's it. I'm going to, before I turn off the recording, do you have any question?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, all right, that's good. So I'm going to, let me